Good morning. You're listening to Spectrum at 105.9 WJZW Woodbridge, Washington, and WBZS Alexandria, Washington. I'm Thomas Grooms, and joining us live in the studio this morning, Mick Fleetwood, musician and business entrepreneur here in Alexandria. Good morning, Mick.
Good morning. I love that title.
Welcome to Spectrum and welcome to Smooth Jazz.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Now, you have been in the Washington area. Well, this is going on your second year.
Correct.
And you've been working on a project called Fleetwood's, which is starting to get quite a name for itself. I think the buzz on the street is it's going to be comparable to the Cellar Door, what the Cellar Door used to be in Washington.
Well, if it stays around that long, we'll be very happy.
And I must say, I have received quite an education from hanging out at Fleetwood's and a greater appreciation for jazz and blues. How did the whole concept start?
Well, I mean, it actually went back to, dare I say it, my childhood in actual fact. I used to live out this fantasy, and my parents had a stable. They said, that building there is yours. And I proceeded to put basically a toy drum kit over there and call the place Fleetwood's. Even in those days, I was about 11 years old. And that's where I started my first club, which was sort of, certainly this has been an extension of that childhood dream. One where certainly it's made a lot of sense for me. I spend a lot of time in and around the music business. This is, as they say, this is my life, for better or for worse. And I found that in terms of an idea, that it just made a lot of sense, that it was something that I could remain involved in. Always thinking, I suppose, in the back of my mind that during downtime from certainly Fleetwood Mac, I always end up sort of hankering either to play or to be producing or doing something. So this, in terms of the selfish aspect of this, made a lot of sense. And it was truly something that I had wanted to do for many, many, many years. And one thing led to another, and we found ourselves here in Alexandria. So that's how it sort of happened. I could go and bore you for about another hour. So some other aspects of how it came about. But really that is truly how we ended up doing this. And it's great. I mean, I get to play whenever I want to play, which is usually fairly often down at Fleetwood's. And I think there's a certain sense that I've learnt through being in Fleetwood Mac for nearly 28 years now, that there's a sense of nurturance that comes out, which is sorely lacking in this business. I think the line of business that you're in, even, I see you going over and above with what really means something to you personally. And I have to say, in radio, that's fairly unusual. The nature of the station is certainly way on the right side of the tracks for a musician, because you take an interest in unknown artists, you play them, you talk about them. But really, in general, you don't get that out in radio land. And that's something I'm always looking to in terms of hopefully trying to put back something as a player into a local situation, which is, I'll pat you on the back. That's certainly something that is very noticeable with your work, and it's appreciated.
Thank you. You're listening to Spectrum on 105.9 WJZW and WBZS. Our guest this morning, the legendary Mick Fleetwood, musician and business entrepreneur here in Alexandria, and he is the owner and operator of the club Fleetwood's here in Alexandria. Now, Mick, I don't know if you know this or not, but when I was a kid, I used to go down by that area because you really have built that club on sacred ground.
Oh, my God.
Alexandria roller rink used to be there, and that was the venue where everybody played. I saw the Yardbirds. I saw Rod Stewart hide behind Jeff Beck and play there in the 60s. So that area has a musical history and a heritage that I think everybody should know about. This is before the U.S. Air Arena and the Baltimore Civic Center.
Goodness me.
but that was the place where it all happened, and you're just a stone's throw away from the old roller rink. Why did you choose Alexandria for your business?
Well, we spent a long time searching a venue out. We did the Georgetown routine and went out into other areas around the Washington, D.C. areas, sort of half an hour out of town type of, I forget the names of, we went to so many potential venues, and then we came upon Little Alexandria, and this venue, which is very beautiful, it's on the river, which was something that appealed to me, because the aesthetics I thought were important. It's certainly safe, and it just made a lot of sense, and we were able to build out the club the way we wanted to, and certainly the local situation, I think, was a little bit skeptical, but only if but briefly, and they got behind the whole project and were really encouraging us to do that, and that we're hoping that area is actually, and it's already starting. There's a couple of restaurants going in there. I believe before too very long they have plans to put a mini marina there, so we figured this is a good place to plonk ourselves down. It's a very beautiful spot, it's a lovely place to come weekends in the summer. It's fantastic, just people walking along and roller skating, and there's Fleetwood's.
Well, I must say, from hanging out there from the first night that you opened up, you're not only a unique club which offers, fine entertainment as far as blues and jazz goes, but you also give a lot back to the community. You have the folks from AFAC out there taking contributions to help the food bank. Just prior to you coming into the studio, the fine folks from the Campagna Center were our guests, and I spoke to them about you, and you did a benefit when you had Fleetwood Mac play there. So you're helping the Alexandria area and also offering a venue for people to see great music. And as I said, I was comparing it to the Cellar Door, because the Cellar Door was a quality club to go to.
Absolutely.
And I'm endorsing you myself. I must say, the people that are coming to play at Fleetwood's, you can't see them anywhere else. 703-548-6425 is the number to call, and you can find out just exactly what is going on at Fleetwood's. And now that, you're here at Smooth Jazz, your first gig was a jazz festival, wasn't it?
The Windsor Jazz Festival, August 1967. That's correct. It was then Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac.
And people may think that you're interested in the blues and jazz as a diversion, but actually Fleetwood Mac started as a blues outfit.
Oh, very much so. I mean, we were spawned out of John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Peter Green had taken over from Eric Clapton, who of course made his name with John Mayall, and before that with the Yardbirds. But truly, that was Peter's took over from Eric and did a fine job, I might say. And all the Clapton is God and Green is God stuff was going on, being spray painted over the London underground. And John McVie, bass, with John Mayall, Blues Breakers, and Mick Fleetwood for a short while. So there were three members that came out of that was formed later to be Fleetwood Mac.
You're listening to Spectrum. If you just joined us, our guest this morning, Mick Fleetwood, musician and business entrepreneur here in Alexandria, owner and operator of Fleetwood's Restaurant. And now we're talking about jazz. Why don't you play disc jockey and pick a couple of tunes for us? I know you have over there in your pile Gato Barbieri, who did a tune called Europa, co-written by Carlos Santana. And I think maybe you should share with the folks that Black Magic Woman was not a Santana song, but a Fleetwood Mac song.
That is certainly an age-old anecdote that has to be brought up in probably 1,001 interviews. Yes, indeed, Black Magic Woman, which was a universal hit for Carlos with Santana, was a Peter Green Fleetwood Mac composition, and we, of course, recorded it quite a while before Carlos did his fantastic version of it. In fact, very recently, I was in London, and I was talking to Peter Green, who is alive and well, for maybe the somewhat few of you out there that remember Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac. And we are doing a tribute album to Peter Green, and Carlos is coming out very kindly along with Eric and many other people to do some of Peter's work on this album. And Peter said, "Oh, that sounds great." And he said, "I spoke to Carlos not so long ago." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, you know, God, I like Santana." And he's so humble, Peter. He's sort of lost a sense of reality about what he means to other players. And of course, Carlos, I said, "Well, you know what, Carlos is a major fan of yours, Pete." You know, he said, "Is he really?" I said, "Absolutely, you know he is." So anyhow, the story goes exactly that way, that Carlos has been a fantastic player, in the sense that he reaches out, he pushes envelopes. He's played with all sorts of extraordinary, interesting players, and this is certainly an instance where you can hear that in practice.
Okay, well, why don't you set up that Gato Barbieri, Europa. Here's Gato Barbieri on Washington's unique radio station, Smooth Jazz, 105.9 WJZW.
I have a lot of faith in
Smooth Jazz, 105.9. That was Slim Man and Faith in Us, who is a local musician, and also Gato Barbieri, Europa, two tunes that Mick Fleetwood chose this morning. Mick is with us in the studio. Mick is a musician, of course, and business entrepreneur and owner and operator of Fleetwood's. And you were mentioning while Slim Man was playing that you'll be booking him into the club?
Absolutely. Maybe no sooner said than done. Yeah, absolutely. He's a great player, and of course is setting a lot of people on fire right now. They're really getting turned on to his music.
You're listening to Spectrum. Our guest this morning, Mick Fleetwood. We're talking about Fleetwood's here in Alexandria. Fleetwood's is a fine club offering the best in blues and the best in jazz. And what a menu! I mean, you got it going on as far as the food goes.
Yes, we're actually celebrating a new chef right now too, so the food gets better and better, and that's the way I like it and the way it should be, which is part of what Fleetwood's represents. It's somewhere where you can have a really mighty fine meal without putting a huge hole in your pocket, and get some pretty darn good entertainment, where we feel we're hoping, of course, that as in Fleetwood's tradition, that people will come back and support some of the artists, especially these local people, some of whom we've played tonight. That is what this is all about. I remember it only too well, that a bottle of wine and a nice plate of spaghetti after a long journey in the back of a van was always a good gig, and I hope and I feel that Fleetwood represents that to our players, that we really try and reach out and take care of people who play, and of course the customers, it's a given, but I like to spoil the players who come to Fleetwood's, and I think it's something that in fact I know that I have letters from players that it's somewhat unusual. You usually get slung in the back of a kitchen or something and said, "Well, you're on in 30 minutes and see you later." That doesn't happen here.
Well, I said it earlier that Fleetwood's is not only a place to have a fine meal and see a good band, a good blues band or a good jazz band, and you don't only give back to the community by helping the nonprofit organizations, but you also want to help local musicians. I understand you have that on the back burner. You're trying to set up a label or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm in the throes of talking about being an entrepreneur, which is always a strange word for a little musician or a long gangling musician, but it is the case. I've started a record company, needless to say, called Fleetwood Records, and our first release is actually the undiscovered BBC tapes of old Fleetwood Mac, which is now out in England and about to be out here in about 6 weeks. And yes, that is something that I'm looking forward to being really involved in. Certainly something I believe I know a fair amount about. And it's certainly a way of putting back. And again, I have to bring up what I think we mentioned at the beginning of the show, was there is not enough interest taken in what I consider nurturing. The nurturance of talent is a very spotted event. You don't see enough of it, and maybe in somewhat of a small way, we are going to be definitely part of that positioning, as far as I'm concerned, that you really stick with somebody and see them through and guide them through, and that's how it used to be in the old days, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And locally, again, when we opened this restaurant, I took a lot of care in finding local talent and basically meeting local talent and trying to sort of clue myself up as much as possible what was going on around here. I'm still learning, I'm sure there's many wonderful people that I've still got to happen upon, So onward we go.
Well, we're very fortunate to have you here in the Washington area, and I must add, you're ably assisted by your lovely wife, Lynn, at the club. She's in there 24 hours a day working. You've got the best sound man in Washington, John Remedini, and Joe Byrne helping you out.
John's sitting right here.
So I owe him money. And you just know that you're going to have a good time. And I mean, every show is an experience when you go to Fleetwood's. 703-548-6425 is the number to call to find out more. With us in the studio this morning, Mick Fleetwood, musician and business entrepreneur. And I'm sure you're sick of this question, but what's going on with Fleetwood Mac?
Well, we have a new album out. It came out on the 10th, I think. And we are basically entering another phase of Fleetwood Mac's history. We've added 2 new people to the lineup. The lineup, I suppose I should read it through, is John McVie on bass, myself on drums, Mick Fleetwood. Christine is present on the album, doesn't tour with us as of the moment. She's had enough of touring, but she's done some fantastic work on this new album, Christine McVie. Billy Burnett, who's been with us now for 10 years. This is his third album with Fleetwood Mac. And Dave Mason on guitar. Anyone out there who's either forgotten or doesn't know who Dave Mason is, Traffic, Steve Winwood, he was the original guitar player with Traffic, and of course went on to come to the States here and did a lot of fantastic solo work, Only You Know and I Know, and
Feeling All Right,
Onward and Onward, and a young lady who is a fantastic talent, the daughter of Delaney and Bonnie, going back to the early 70s. You may remember Eric Clapton played with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and this is their daughter. If you knew her mother, or if you know her mother, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But that's the new lineup, and we have a new album out on Warner Brothers called Time, and we are in that mode of certainly getting ready to go out on the road before too very long. And the Mac is back. What can I say? We're plugging away.
And you guys can really cook. I saw you in your own club. You were cooking.
Oh, yeah. We still have... me and John McVie often find ourselves in the back of the bus at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning going, we're still at it. We're still at it, and we enjoy it, and it's like the Stones. Just when you think they're going to give it up, they go and tour for another couple of years. So we're in that mode.
You're listening to Spectrum. If you just joined us, our guest this morning, Mick Fleetwood, musician and business entrepreneur for Fleetwoods. He owns and operates a business here in Alexandria, and it is a fine club. We urge everyone to stop by, at least go down and see the club, check out some of the groups that are there, and you will have blues and jazz. That is part of your
very much
scene.
So. You won't get any garage bands playing there, no.
You were telling me a Dizzy Gillespie story earlier before we came on the air. Would you like to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I met Dizzy many years ago. I spent some time in Paris, and I went to one of his shows and did the usual thing, went backstage, and we struck up a really sweet friendship that lasted for many years. And then the last time I actually saw him, unfortunately, before he passed away, was probably about a couple of years. I was coming back from Europe, and we bumped into each other again and spent the whole flight just talking. And it was a very... I thought of it when I realized, found out that he had passed away. I remembered that conversation because there was a lot of soul-searching and a lot of musicians that came ostensibly from very different backgrounds. And yet a lot of what he would say and what he was saying, I certainly identified with. Anything from how to retain a home life and be a musician to abuse. We had talked about the way that we'd both beaten up our bodies pretty heavily in our day, and yet his love for his music was so evident, and his sense of fun, and honesty was spectacular. And he was pretty damn old then. I forget how old he was when he passed away, but he was working, and I just go, that's why this all makes sense. When you see someone who literally is older than you are, and sometimes you go, is this okay to be doing this? And you go, well, of course it is. It's like asking B.B. King or asking Dizzy, or and down the scale you go up to the Eric Claptons, and I suppose I'm jammed in there somewhere, but I always look to sort of people in interviews, and they say, well, why are you still doing this? It's because we really love doing it. And Dizzy was one of those guys that was blown away right up till he passed away. So it was a great inspiration, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. And I love his playing too.
Well, you definitely can tell when someone's into it, and I know you're into it because you can see you jump up on the drum kit, get right into it at your club anytime extemporaneously, and it's really cool to be into the music that way. Plus, you're bringing this music to all of us here in Washington. Now, there's rumor on the street that you're going to put something together with the legendary Bobby Parker.
Yeah, it's next Thursday, I believe, which is, I forget what date that is. What date is it? Say it loud, Johnny.
26th.
It's the 26th. There you go. Don't be afraid there, Johnny. Speak up, Yeah, well, Bobby, I met when I first came here to think about doing this club, and I was in that reaching out mode, and Bobby walked in, and I had met him when I was a young whippersnapper, and he remembered. I thought there's no way he's going to remember that, because he was someone, the Jeff Becks and the Peter Greens, they all knew Bobby's playing, and he remembered more about the meeting than I did, to be blunt, which was amazing. And he's someone that I played with, and we're getting together a little situation here, because I'm actually out of the studio, which ate a lot of my time up, so I'm actually present and correct here at Alexandria at the club. And yes, we're going to be doing some playing and pushing the old envelope.
That's great. That cat wrote the riff to Day Tripper. You know, John Lennon gave him credit for the guitar riff to Day Tripper years and years ago. And Spencer Davis did Watch Your Step with Winwood.
Absolutely. I mean, the classic stuff, you know. Classic stuff. He's a major talent, and I think someone that, from what I gather, had a period where I suspect he was disheartened with what he was doing and the situation he's been around, and I've read interviews by him that intimates that. I'm just really glad to see he's recording again, and he's got a good work situation. Great player. You know, I was talking to him at length last night. He's just a handsome person.
He's bad, and he's got you on his team. So,
yeah. Hey, I'd be there any day, you know.
You're listening to Spectrum on 105.9 WJZW Woodbridge, Washington, and WBZS Alexandria, Washington. Our guest this morning has been Mick Fleetwood, drummer for that band Fleetwood Mac, and business entrepreneur and owner and operator of Fleetwood's Restaurant. 703-548-6425 is the number to call if you want to find out more about Fleetwood's. Mick, before you split, would you like to add anything in conclusion about Fleetwood's and why people should check you out?
Well, I mean, come on down. I mean, it's there for everyone's enjoyment. It's also open during the day, but it's those nights that you have to try. Come down and don't be afraid of experimenting, because I know some guys and girls out there, ladies and men, sometimes don't know who's playing, but I can basically, you should rest assured that anyone who does play at Fleetwood's is of a really cool caliber, and you won't be disappointed.
Definitely, and we'll be looking for Slim Man.
Slim Man, come on down.
Mick, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure.
That's it for this week's edition of Spectrum. I'm Thomas Grooms. Have a good week, and join us again next Sunday for another edition of Spectrum on 105.9 WJZW Woodbridge, Washington, and WBZS Alexandria, Washington.